Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. And today we are going to explore bootstrapping insurtechs and lessons that corporate innovation teams can borrow. Laura, do you want to do the introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And it's an exciting topic. It's relevant not only for us, but we know it's relevant for a lot of our listeners. So we're excited today to have James Benham with us. He's the co-founder and CEO of JBKnowledge, TerraClaim and Smart Compliance. He has a lot of other titles and experience on the deck, so we'll let him jump into that. James, if you wouldn't mind doing a brief intro and letting people know, who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure, don't mind at all. Again, my name is James Benham. I'm out of beautiful College Station, Texas, otherwise known as God's Country, home of Texas A&M, the world's finest institute of higher education. Sorry, I always got to slide that in there. Aggies are just abrasively annoying about being an Aggie. I am from Baton Rouge. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I was born and raised there, and came over to College Station, Texas, 25 years ago, and could just never find it to leave. Did 2 internships with a large accounting firm, and then decided that wasn't my path. And so when I was still finishing up my degrees in business, I got an undergrad and master's in business from A&M. I started this business out of my dorm room and started writing code for people 21 years ago now, and am still doing it today. We're a 270 employee team when you combine my 3 companies, JBKnowledge, TerraClaim, and Smart Compliance. And so I do that. I also, my volunteer gig, the governor of Texas appointed me to the Texas Southern University Board of Regents. And so I've been doing that for the last year and a half, helping run a historically black college down in Houston, Texas. Super proud of the Tigers. We actually just went into the NCAA March Madness and won our first game. Unfortunately, Kansas took us out last night, but I really enjoy getting to work with them, and I got married to 2 lovely children, my daughters, who are here on vacation with me out in California, where I am today. And as far as hobbies, I'm a pilot, and that consumes about all my spare cycles. So I love to fly anything with wings, and so do that a whole bunch, and also love to play music. I always bring my guitar with me. So at the conference I spoke at here in San Diego, we had a jam session with all the guys that brought our guitars. So, just that's me in a nutshell. Like to have fun, like to build technology, love to play music, and love to be up in the sky.
Okay, you are living large. This is great, and thanks for joining us. And our listeners may have heard you on some of your other. You have a couple of podcasts. Tell us about the content that you produce that's related to the businesses you're.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved in insurance software development for 18 years now of the 21. It's been a while. And through that, I got into a lot of really interesting doors like construction. And in 2006, built a really neat pre-qualification and bidding platform that really helped out the builder's risk and surety bonding space. And it was called Smart Bid. And so I ran that company for 12 years, sold it in 2018 to a large public company called Roper. But I started a construction podcast, and it was, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. And we've had, it was 6.5 years ago. Sorry, because we've had over 300 episodes of the ConTech Crew. It's just all about construction technology and what's changing it. And then a couple of years ago, I got with my buddy Rob Galbraith, who wrote The End of Insurance as We Know It. And Rob and I co-host a weekly show called the Insuretech Geek Podcast, all about just geeky, nerdy insurance tech topics. I'm a hardcore sci-fi fan, so I love anything remotely close to Star Trek or anything taking us close to that future. So we cover all kinds of new things on Insuretech Geek and ConTech Crew. So I've been doing that for quite some time.
Yeah, Rob's great. He actually came out and on his book tour and visited our offices, and we've got quite a good group in in Hartford. Stacy Brown's got a lot of activity. At some point, you got to stop in Hartford. Have you spent any time in Hartford, Connecticut? It's not Texas.
I've been a professional speaker for 17 years now. I've spoken at 450 conferences roughly, and let me say this: Connecticut is not a conference hotspot. And
until now.
No, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I can go back and look at my bookings. I have gotten to speak. I've gotten to speak in Connecticut one total time. It was in Hartford. It was in Hartford, so I did enjoy going there. So I have gotten to speak in Connecticut. That is my visit. I've been to Boston a lot more than that. New York a lot more than that. But love Connecticut. Interesting. Oh, I've got a random fact. Podcasts, I like going on little tangents in a podcast. And here's a great one for you. My 11th great grandmother was the last witch trial in Connecticut. How about that?
Really?
Yes.
Really?
So same last name, Winifred, the Wicked Witch of Wallingford, Connecticut. Benham. Benham. So Winifred, the Wicked Witch of Wallingford, Benham, in Wallingford, Connecticut. That was the last witch trial, and she was acquitted. And she lived to give birth to my 10th great grandfather. And I'm here today because some lovely folks in Connecticut acquitted her. So there's your random Connecticut tie-in with my my life.
Yeah, well, I think Laura, coincidence. I think you one of your great grandfathers, one of the judges, right? Yeah. No, this is it's good stuff. Now, of course, you did this startup, and I'm sure you went to fine school. They taught you how to do a PowerPoint. You did a 10-point PowerPoint when you started this business. You went to the VCs. They said, "Oh my, James, here's a check for $20 million." Right? That's your backstory.
It's so funny how many of those stories. The good stories they'll always say, and that definitely was not mine. I took a Excel spreadsheet actually, and I wish I would have kept it. But I built an Excel spreadsheet of my pro forma numbers of what I thought I could do. And I went to my dad and I said, "Dad, I need a few $1,000 just to start a business." Because I was a broke college kid. And I originally went to banks and they're like, we don't lend money to college kids. I'm like, okay. And so, no, we did not go raise money. We did not go to VCs. We actually took a few $1,000 and built what is now a 270 employee company. And have sold companies out of that. When we started and built and funded our product, we never actually raised a round. We went and self-funded it, and so we are what you would call hardcore bootstrappers, meaning we take a very small money, meaning a few $1,000, and turn it into something much bigger than that, using some basic principles that are not exactly taught in business school.
Okay, so tell us, please.
I always have to say that because I got 2 degrees in business, and they didn't teach me much about bootstrapping. All right, they didn't teach me jack about bootstrapping. The common thinking in business school is they study case study after case study of venture capital and of going to banks and getting leverage, right? They call debt leverage to make it sound less bad. And one of the things I went through that I really enjoyed was Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, FPU, that Dave Ramsey does. And he just teaches you how to live within your means, and on a personal level, how to get rid of debt, and how to live and consume and generate cash and then consume your own cash rather than borrowing it. And it really changed my life. And my dad was always militant about living inside your means. His famous phrase was, "If your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep is your downfall." And so he was always about being very careful with your spending and staying out of debt. And so when we started this business, the goal was to build a cash generating machine that would allow us to build what we really wanted to do. And I had to learn both from my father's mentorship and from Dave Ramsey's classes and from just life experience and being mentored by a lot of other really good men and women who are business people who really poured into me on how to bootstrap any kind of effort, whether it was a big company or a little company. And I would, if I had to sum it all up into one sentence for you, Paul, bootstrapping is building what you have to build so you can build what you want to build. And I can say I started this company building websites and custom software for anybody that would pay me money. And I plowed every dime. And Paul, I mean, every stinking dime into investing and building products. And unfortunately, our first 5 products were either a wash or a failure. A wash meaning it returned capital, or a failure meaning that it lost capital. But that 6th one, we hit it out of the park on. And so that's really what bootstrapping is about, is making mistakes small, generating cash using doing something that you might not want to do in the end. And for me, that was building websites. I hated building websites, but we built a lot of them, built over 400 of them. And we just used all the profit we made to be our own VCs, be our own seed capital, to generate our own profit. And then we, of course, what it requires, Paul, is an incredible amount of patience, a lot of self-discipline, and a willingness to defer the good times for about a decade while you build that cash generating machine and experiment with your first few ideas. But at the end result is that you are your own board and you don't have to report to anybody. And that's really nice. And if you're in a big company, bootstrapping means that you can generate your own cash to try your own ideas out, so you're not constantly back at the till asking for more cash. So there's some really, really great principles there in bootstrapping that have certainly changed our lives at JBK.
So they say that mistakes often teach us more than, say, a business course or yet another degree. You mentioned that you had a lot of mistakes getting started. Is there one mistake that stands out as being memorable that's kind of helped lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, I would say other people's mistakes can teach you a lot too. And that's really where I think business case studies, it's just as useful in business school. Now, mind you, I learned a lot in business school. I mean, my accounting degree taught me a lot about how business works, especially cost accounting. Cost accounting was one of the most useful classes I ever took, because it taught me how to calculate what a particular effort inside of a large organization cost. And so you can set your pricing. Like, cost accounting was great. Finance was great. And I wish business school spent more time on case studies of people that screwed up, because they really focused on all the success stories. And some of the, a lot of success that I've had in business has been because I'm just stubborn, and I've been in business long enough to meet the right people for good things to happen. But definitely, I'd say one of the biggest lessons I learned the hard way, and that I saw my friends learn the really hard way, is to make your mistakes small. And that's a really critical thing, in particular in bootstrapping. Whether you're in a large company and you're bootstrapping, or you're in small business and you're bootstrapping, if you make your mistakes really big, in other words, you go all in on your initial thesis, and that's what I mean by making mistakes big. You go all in on an initial thesis.
Mm-hmm.
You run out of capital before you pivot, and you're almost inevitably going to pivot. Now, I've seen countless cases of this at large insurance carriers, where somebody brilliant and really entrepreneurial inside the organization comes up with this thesis and idea, and they go to the management team and they get a lot of capital together, and they get like $1, $2, $3 million, and they plow all of it into this like Cadillac of a minimum viable product, like this Cadillac MVP. Instead of building a Chevy, they build a Cadillac, and they blow the capital out the door. It doesn't work out because something in their thesis was flawed. And instead of being able to pivot, management team says, "No way, you just blew $3 million. We're not going to give you $2 million more." And so I would say that we had the same thing happen, where our first couple ideas, I put way too much capital in before I tested the hypothesis. And that was my big lesson learned. I saw my friends do it as well with venture funded companies. Unfortunately for them, most of them are out of business because they blew all the investor capital before the pivot. You've got to retain some gunpowder so that you can keep firing bullets after you pivot. Because the pivot may be, well, our initial thesis was that cyber for small to medium enterprise was going to be something we could direct to consumer, but really we have to pivot and provide a better set of tools for cyber for small business. And so that was the big lesson learned for me in bootstrapping, was if you keep your mistakes small enough that you have enough powder in reserve, you're going to go through the inevitable pivot. And I think that's what a lot of people have a hard time, Laura, accepting, is that your initial idea is probably a little screwed up. You're probably going to have to pivot. You're going to get humbled by the market, because they're going to tell you why you need to change it a little bit, or maybe even a lot. And if you've burnt through all your capital, you're donesy. I mean, you're done. Whether it's at a large insurance carrier or at a venture capital backed company or a bootstrap company, the challenge at a bootstrap company is you have so little capital that you have to be extremely capital efficient. So we started smart content, smart e-commerce. We started a project management platform. We started an intranet product before SharePoint was really big. And then we ended up with this bidding system that I actually built for the printing business, but I kept enough money in reserve that when somebody over in insurance and construction saw it and said, hey, that would work really well over here for pre-qualifying people that have to be bonded and for bidding out work to them, we had enough money left that we pivoted, rebuilt, reshaped the platform and the marketing and the brand, renamed it, and it started selling like hotcakes. And I mean, like, we went from selling a few units of other products to where like we sold 53 units of SmartBid its first full year in business. And then, we eventually had 250,000 companies using it when we sold it. I mean, just to give you an idea of how much it hit. And we operated in over 14 time zones in 3 languages. I mean, it was big, but it would never have gotten there if I hadn't made the initial mistakes small. I mean, my initial thesis was that printing companies wanted to use it. Totally wrong thesis.
Yeah, it's a small mistake. I think are real critical. Listen, I tell you, my career, yes, I made a lot of mistakes. I think I've seen people read the book and say, "I'll fail fast," but they didn't read the next chapter or the next paragraph, which is, but do it without blowing the budget. And I think what you just described is James, really potent, right? Which is take small steps to get to where you want to go. I mean, that's how I internalize what you've said and learned.
Yeah, and take that initial hypothesis. Everything is an initial thesis, right? In business, everything starts with this idea that becomes a fleshed out description, and the ultimate goal is to spend as little money as possible building out your minimum viable product that allows you to test your idea, and then get it into the hands of people that can test it as fast as possible. Like that's what I did. We just finished building an insurance claim system called TerraClaim. Now I've been building bespoke custom stuff in-house for carriers and TPAs for 18 years now. But we wanted to compete in the small market, the self-insured groups and funds and companies and small regional TPAs that play in this space. I've been wanting to do that for a while. And what we did is we went all in on development of an MVP. I mean, we cut the corners down to exactly the product that they needed. I went and found 2 beta clients, and we said, what's the exact thing you need to replace what you're doing now? And then we built that exact product. And we said, we got to trim this back to the bare minimum so that if we have to pivot, we have enough money left that we can pivot, because these are huge development efforts, right? These are huge, massive development efforts. And so that's really what it is if you had to say, well, how do I make a mistake small? What does that even mean? Like, what are the steps to that? Well, you create an MVP, you define it, and then you cut it back and you cut it back and you cut it back again until it does the exact bare minimum thing. You're building a Chevy, not a Cadillac, so that you can go and see if the market likes it or they don't like it or they hate it or they love it, and you can get it into their hands. And by the way, all your beta clients will tell you what you want to hear, because people don't like to disappoint others. And so the initial idea, if you're an insurance company, you want to build a new product out, and you have your customer, loyalty council that you have, or what do you call it? They're going to be so nice and sweet to you until you ask them to spend money with you. And it is at that point, when they have to spend money with you, that they will take the cover off and actually unload a can of truth on you. And it's gonna be painful when they do, when you ask them for that credit card.
Right. Well, okay, so we're kind of, a lot of these startups are sort of caught in this VC cycle, and the VCs, love them. We have a lot of great relationships. They're supporters, but it's kind of like, what's the thing what's the great white dot they're chasing? And you know what? It maybe you're wrong. And if you chase this thing, you'll end up in some place you don't want to be. Consulting services, like I would say, a lot of these companies we've worked with have been told by VCs, look, you got to create a software service. By the way, you need oh, but my clients need help implementing this stuff. They need consulting services. Don't do it. We're going to like discount the value of that stuff. If I'm trying to push my hypothesis is, let me take one that's would be difficult to implement. Look, I think machine learning can cut expenses at a claims shop or something by 40, 50%. By the way, not claims. There are a lot of other, as you know, work processes that could do it. Is it wrong to take a consulting engagement, right? If I'm doing a startup and maybe have 80% of my revenue come from consulting versus the quote unquote product as I get out the door?
Forever, right? I mean, it's we still do consulting. We do custom dev. But you just have to be careful to keep your walls separate, and remember that, and look at your intellectual property rights. That, like, who owns what you're building and who owns the ideas of what you're building,
Yes.
and you just got to be really careful that that you keep the lanes clear, right, on intellectual property ownership and competition. You certainly don't want to be competing against your clients. Like, that's something I'm really careful about, that I'm not creating. Like, I'm not trying to start a digital MGA that's going to compete against the TPAs I work for on my consulting division, right? Like, that'd be terrible, right? So you've got to be careful to make sure that you keep your lanes clear, but there is absolutely a ton to be learned from being a consultant and a bespoke custom developer. You can learn a lot through the process. You just got to respect your client's privacy and their confidentiality and intellectual property rights. So there's some common tripwires you got to be careful of, but there's a lot of room to play in that space. I mean, there's a lot of people that you would never compete against that are going to be excited that you go into a product space that will happily hire you as a consultant, because it's really hard to find talented technology help. I mean, it really is challenging. And so I think consulting is a wonderful way to enter the business. And you see a lot of consultants from Accenture and Price Waterhouse and Deloitte and E&Y end up going into the startup space because they spend 5 years or 8 years, refining their idea, their thesis as a consultant, and then they go and start a new startup solving that exact problem. And so I think the market proves that out. You said something interesting, and that is when they get on like the VC train. Like, once you take VC money, you are committed to a path that must be directly aligned with the fund terms that you accepted money from. And I think that's what a lot of folks don't think about, is that, like, your VC may be on a 5-year fund. They've got to return capital to their investors in X amount of time. And so they're going to do everything possible to either exit as a company or to bring additional investors in and get bought out of their round, or, they're going to do what they have to do to comply with the terms of how they raise their money. And that may not align with the best interest of you or your clients. And that's one big issue is, once you're on the train, you're staying on the train. Once you raise a seed round, you're worried about that A round and that B round and that C round and that D round, unless your seed round was from people who can play super long and don't care, and you manage to actually get up on the rails in your seed round and start generating cash so you can bootstrap from there. My seed round was $5,000 from my dad. He was playing long ball, plus it was $5,000. I mean, who cares? I mean, it was, so we were able to make a lot of mistakes and play long ball. So I think that's something to really think about too.
Okay, so you said E round or A, B, C, D. I just saw a huge E round announced, okay, by an Insuretech. Now, is that long ball? I mean, there are a lot of them there. There are a lot there in these E rounds, right? They haven't gone public.
Is the small cap market sucks. Okay, so historically, those companies would have IPO'd already in the small cap growth stock, and they don't want to now. And so they're getting better valuations in the private market than they are, and they're watching Lemonade and Hippo.
Yes.
And so Hippo's at $2, Lemonade's in the tank. I mean, they're watching these high flying Insurtechs IPO and nosedive because, like, loss ratios aren't good. I mean, the fundamentals. So that's where that's why I think you're going to continue to see large E rounds, DE rounds, because no one wants to be a small cap equity and IPO as early as they used to, because the public markets enforced discipline. They enforce fiscal discipline, and they do not have the grow at all costs, push revenue at all costs mentality that private equity and venture capital do, which is, their willingness to subsidize and push growth. That's not the way it works once you hit the public markets, as evidenced by the stock price of the companies that have IPO'd.
Well, you mentioned those companies. It's so easy. As as a startup, it's so easy for people to sit back and play the armchair quarterback. Oh, stupid idea! I told you this was not going to work. I know from experience. You can make. You're doing a startup like this. You can make 20 right decisions, and you make one bad one, and it tanks. You probably said there was a board game. I can't remember the name, Laura, of the board game. It was like a .com board game where it was like name the company that blew up, in the .com when the .com bubble burst. And these businesses that blew up and everybody laughed at then, right, James? They're successful. The idea was right. The timing was off, right?
That's why you got to be really careful making fun of people. And what I'm saying is, like, when I talk about Lemonade, which is down, let's just talk about like the data, like the raw facts. Like Lemonade was up at $100 a share, and it's at 25 right now, right? Hippo was at 10, and it's down at 2. So the people who bought high on that took a bath. I mean, they're in a big bath. So let's not derive pleasure out of others' pain, and I don't ever believe in doing that. And you should. Lemonade's doing something really important. They're pushing the user experience, and we should all learn from what Lemonade's doing that you can acquire a lot of customers by providing a far superior user experience and leveraging big data, because those are two of the things they're doing exceedingly well. It's very easy to get quoted. It's very easy to bind and pay. They leverage a ton of public data and big data repositories, so you don't have to key in all the information on your property. They already have it. They're adding on bundled, but with Metro Mile, bundled purchase by the mile insurance, which is beneficial for a lot of work from home folks. So there's a lot of good things going on in that sector. And certainly one good thing that has happened from Insuretech's IPOing and being high flying for at least a period of time is that they push the incumbent carriers to really rethink their user experience, their direct to consumer plays, their use of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data. There's been a lot of good things that came from that. And I think we're kind of in the trough of disillusionment. If you remember, like the hype cycle, where you kind of you have that initial peak, and then you hit the trough, and then you grow out of that. Well, if you look at, you mentioned timing, like you look at like Webvan, like those startups, Peapod.
Oh yeah, the pet, the all the pet companies. Oh my God, who's going to buy pet food online? Oh, lots of people.
Well, it turns out now a ton of people do. And if you look at like Chewy and Amazon, like they own the planet. So the stuff that tanked in '99 owns the planet right now, like in profitable big businesses. So often it's not a bad idea. It's just the wrong timing for that good idea. And so that's why we have to pay attention to every single idea that gets tried out. And so, well, how did it do, and why did it fail, and what really went wrong? Were they just overhyped? Because that's often the cardinal sin that they commit. It's not actually that they have a bad idea. They were just overhyped. Now, if they have a fundamentally terrible loss ratio in the insurance business, then you have to ask yourself the question, was the thesis fundamentally flawed, right? Like they said they were better at setting rates. They said they were better at handling claims. If their loss ratios continue to suck, then you have to question the core thesis, but maybe not how they got there.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
But that's just a rate issue. Paul, that's just a rate issue. I mean,
exactly. It's just rate. They were using the wrong rate tables.
Yeah, they were literally using the wrong rate tables. Like just, maybe they were trying to buy growth in number of policyholders by intentionally pushing, screwing up their rate tables. I mean, the public market's not going to allow you to do that. Like a private equity firm will allow you to intentionally underprice your coverage. The public market will not. And so, Lemonade could possibly turn it around by just saying, hey, we're bumping all the rates up because losses are coming in too high. They get their loss ratio in line, and then they don't grow as fast. Either way, they're probably dealing with it being slightly overhyped, and they're going to have to their stock price is going to have to come back into line with what a similar sized carrier in a traditional market would look like. I'm not trying to make this whole show about Lemonade. It's just it's an easy one to talk. It's an easy one to talk about. It's an easy one to talk about because they're public, so you can look at their numbers,
Yeah.
But that's the point for me. Now, if you're bootstrap, no one looks at your numbers but you. But you're not going to get to be a carrier. I don't know if it's possible to bootstrap your way to being a carrier because of the capital requirements. You can bootstrap your way into being a digital MGA, but I don't think you can pull enough capital together as an individual to be a licensed carrier.
Well, I think you start as an MGA, and I've seen that. I've seen that plenty of times, especially in some of these like very specific, commercial P&C sectors like summer camps. I saw a company just go from an agency to an MGA to a carrier based on selling, camp counselor insurance. And they went public. This was the beginning of my career. Didn't have a happy ending. I think they got acquired. But maybe it was happy for somebody. But it's possible. It's just you're not gonna start as a carrier unless you've got
a massive multi-billion-dollar exit, right? Like that's because you've got to have a ton of capital behind it. But that's to me, the interesting thing that we've got to really look at. We're probably in the trough of disillusionment. We're going to have some really great companies that come out of this. You're going to have some where you say, remember that idea? Hey, it works now. Because you just dial in the rate tables. You'll say, well, everything was good except for their rates. So we're gonna do what they did, but with better rates from the beginning. And it's just like when Global Crossing went out of business in 1999. Remember that? This company had plowed billions of dollars into laying fiber optic cable all over the planet. Their thesis was wrong for a lot of reasons. Enron, same thing. Enron had a really interesting thesis about trading available bandwidth. It was just wrong time, But now what's going on? I mean, Global Crossing, their failure led to the foundation of the modern internet. And so, we have to all be thankful, even though their investors probably aren't thankful for taking the bath they had to take.
So sticking on the carrier theme, earlier in the conversation, we talked about corporate innovation teams. And we didn't dive in, but I'm curious your thoughts. So you're an entrepreneur, you've seen all shapes, sizes, flavors, colors of situations. What have you seen from the corporate standpoint? So Paul and I are inside of a carrier, and it's interesting seat that we sit in. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on, innovation inside carriers. What works, what doesn't work? Is it a mindset? Is it a certain breed of individual that's going to make this, innovation as a whole be heard and it's going to be successful? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am very, very, very fortunate to have been able, as a consultant and as a custom software developer, to get to work with some amazing people at large companies who are innovating inside of those big businesses. In my book that's about to come out, which is called The Bootstrapped Entrepreneur, I dedicate a whole chapter just to corporate intrapreneurs. And I tell you, when I look at their psychological profile, they are almost identical to corporate to entrepreneurs that are starting their own business. I mean, like just the same things drive them that drive me, which is why I get along with them so well. We have a lot in common. There's a lot of fun things to talk about, but they, for a variety of reasons, have decided they love the place they work and the people they work with, but they want to be an entrepreneur there instead of starting their own business, which is awesome. So I've gotten to work with a bunch of them. We actually interviewed a bunch of them and said, hey, I interviewed 2 in insurance and 2 in construction for that chapter on it. And then I've laid out a framework of how I think you can build. I call them mad scientists because it's the best thing I can describe this category of person, is that they're a mad scientist in their lab building experiments. When you look at some of the greatest inventions in U.S. history, they actually came out of corporate innovation labs. I mean, some of the great Bell Laboratories invented more intellectual property that is the fundamental underlying of modern telecommunications and the internet than almost anybody else. And it came out of a corporate innovation lab. Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. So if you keep studying all these, Google X, Amazon, I think there's called an Amazon Lab 126. I can't remember Amazon's Skunk Works operation, but there's a lot of these innovation labs that are very successful at building things. I can say that, first off, they have to have an entrepreneur there that has the strong desire to experiment and being willing to try new things out, and by the way, stake their career on it, which is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, it is just happenstance. So do you know Charlie Sadati, who started this Insure program up at in Massachusetts or Cambridge with CIC, the big, huge, kind of like WeWorks, probably WeWorks before WeWorks, in Boston. So yeah, this will lead to another question. It was a forum he put together on insurance and climate change, and Adam call out to Adam Kostecki at Amica. This is talk about your just what you said. So his executive team didn't really think these leak detectors were a big deal. Like, they didn't understand why everybody was focused on leak detection. So this guy actually took YouTube videos. James, you'll love this. He actually built in the boardroom. He was showing me this on his phone. He built like a sort of fake, like a look like your science fair experiment with the leak detection to show everybody how this thing works. And they said, okay, we get it. Like, what? Like, this is the kind of innovation you see in there. And there's a ton of energy, right? Waiting to figure out, how do I navigate the corridors? And so your book does that. Is that right? Is this a cookbook I could use?
It is. Yeah, I have my rules for bootstrapping. I think there's like 36 of them. But then I have a 5-step plan for actually building how to actually do this in a company. Because I've seen these folks really try to build it, and they miss on one of these things, and it ends up not working out. Because it's not easy. First off, I believe that almost every company on the planet already has the energy, enthusiasm, intelligence, and people to pull off any effort they want internally if they really looked for it. That's just a fundamental belief that I have. Like, there tends to be this very self-deprecating mentality that occurs in so many large businesses that the only way we're going to innovate is if we acquire an innovative company. And it's almost like it's the same thing. There's a phrase that happens a lot, that we've said a lot for all of human history. You're never a prophet in your own hometown. Exactly. It's a hilarious thing. Now, mind you, I've keynoted over 450 conferences. Right, I get paid to go speak all over the planet at big events. I mean, London, all of New York, LA. I've been flown to China to speak at stuff. I do not get booked in College Station, Bryan, Texas. I mean, they don't, because what could I possibly have to say that they'd want to hear? It is hilarious. In fact, there's another really famous speaker that said the same thing recently. Hey, I'm doing my first gig in my own hometown. This guy's a really hot speaker everywhere else, and so this same mentality happens at big insurance companies. They think, well, there's no profits in our own hometown here. Well, what if there are? So I argue there's 5 steps, and I'll just give you the summary Cliff Notes version. The first thing is, the executives at said company have to actually believe that there's profits in their own hometown. They have to actually believe they're capable of doing that, and then they have to do something extremely important. They have to set a bold, audacious goal. Peter Diamandis and others call it a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. You must set large goals from the very top, or no one will even try. If you just tee up what you think you can actually do the next year, that is really not a visionary, right? Visionaries should push people to stretch, and even stretch goals often are goals that executives think they can hit because they don't want politically to lose political capital by missing a goal. So they'll say it's a stretch goal, but in their back of their mind, they're still sandbagging. And so you've got to actually put your neck out there as an executive and set bold, audacious goals. I'm going to give you one example. John F. Kennedy. When John F. Kennedy looked at the moon and in a speech said, we're going there before the end of the decade, he was risking his career, his politics, his people. He was risking his reputation on a goal that many believed would never happen. When Elon Musk says we're going to fly a rocket over and over and over and over again and never throw it away anymore. And every one of his astronaut heroes said that he couldn't do it and it crushed him. He still did it. And now they have said, direct quote, I will never question Elon Musk ever again, because he's now flown these rockets dozens of times and he's completely transformed space travel. Small thing, right? So bold, audacious goals and a belief in the top of an insurance company that you actually can get it done is step number one. Number two is you've got to have dedicated staff space and budgets. That means like a physical place they can hang out, an actual budget they don't have to beg for every $1,000 for. And you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Like, you should be able to go and buy a damn iPad without having to requisition it for 6 weeks. And then and then dedicated staff, because innovation, let me tell you this, Paul, innovation doesn't happen in your spare time. And this is something where I've been in a lot of company speeches where I've watched the CEO get up and say, we're an innovative company, we're transforming things, we're going all digital, and then they don't approve an iPad purchase. And they tell people to innovate in their spare time. You go, what spare time? I'm already working 5 days a week plus half Saturdays. When am I supposed to innovate? Like, how is this an innovation effort when it's literally, they use corporate speak like dotted line relationship and, your halftime, or, I mean, I can tell you all the words they use because I've heard all of them. And it's all BS, because if you want to be serious about innovation, give them a budget they have discretionary control over, give them a physical space that they don't share with anybody else, and let them sit in one seat and just innovate. That's step number two. Step number three is you got to have a process. Like, seat of my pants shouldn't be the process. Now, we abide by two processes in our company. EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. Best decision I ever made 7 years ago was reading the book Traction by Gino Wickman and actually following it and hiring an implementer and implementing that process in my business, because it fixed my meetings, because they sucked before that. And almost all meetings suck because they're boring and people repeat themselves and they politic and you don't get anything done. And by the third or fourth innovation committee meeting that you have, everybody's checked out because nothing's actually moving forward. EOS fixed that for me. The other methodology that taught me how to learn to identify waste, which, by the way, is the fundamental tenet in learning to build a solution, is lean. I studied the Japanese, Toyota Way, and then I read the best book on lean I've ever read, called 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers, and it changed my life. And so I found a process. Then on step number 4, you got to spend time studying the problem. Too many of us get obsessed with shiny objects. And so you got to really focus in on studying a problem and really analyzing what the problem is before you build the solution, not after. And then the 5th step is focusing on adoption, like actually figuring out how to make it fun for people to adopt your technology and not be so, the fancy word, recalcitrant, right? Like not be so hesitant to implement technology. The best people I know that are innovators, the growth hackers, we call them mad scientists in the book, is the folks that make it a game. Like, literally, they study game theory and they make it fun for people to adopt new technology. So that's my 5-step plan, because I've looked at all these firms and so many of them mess up on one of those things, and they end up having a lot to talk about but not a lot to show, and that's a problem.
That's great. Yeah, Laura and I we're unable to comment.
I'll say the words for you, Paul. I'll say the words for you. Of course, you can edit.
No, listen.
You can edit this podcast all you want.
I can edit. No, it's interesting, and you kind of look through and say, check. You know what? Oh, that box didn't get checked. It wasn't because of them. It was because of me. Oh, you know what? I didn't think, right? I didn't understand. I wasn't aware. Didn't think. This book sounds great. We got to get you to Hartford. That's thousands of miles away. You're going to be like, you're not going to be a prophet. It'll be like, oh my
exactly.
God. Why do we have him here?
It's funny. It's it is a real thing. I'm going to come up with. I'm sure there's a psychologist who has come up with this and named it. I've already named one theory I have. It's called the benchmarking paradox, because I built a claims benchmarking system that allows you to benchmark claim data performance, average cost per claim, number of claims, total incurred. and I rolled it out, and it was all for the large deductible self-insured retention market that you can't benchmark against the NAIC data, right? So I pulled together millions of claims, and then I got a bunch of different groups to contribute data, largely TPAs. And one by one, they dropped out. And you know the order they dropped out in? The order that they were the worst in. In other words, the worst providers kept dropping out of the claim benchmark because they didn't didn't want to know. They didn't want to know what was wrong in their business, and they didn't want to fix it. It is and it's very similar to the same paradox that you face. You know, like if you just don't believe that you have the staff and people to pull off an effort, it's not going to happen. And it's the same thing with benchmarking. If you don't really want to know what's wrong with your organization, because fundamentally deep inside, you don't really want to do anything about it. That like the status quo, like fundamentally what it comes down to is most of these executives are making enough money, right? They're making enough money and their stock options are worth enough money that what they're much more focused on is continuing to do whatever it is that preserves what they have right at that moment in time. Because that's a much easier thing to do than to risk and to stick your neck out and then to try and do something transformative, right? And so that comfort is the enemy of progress. And so that's the real problem, is they just get too comfortable and the margins are just right and their bonuses are just right, and their comp is just right, and their options are worth just enough that they become very focused on how do I just maintain this. And that's why I think a lot of big insurance companies end up forming venture capital arms. And here's the irony. They'll plunk $250,000 down on a seed round of a company whose pre-money valuation, before their pre-revenue, pre-money valuation of $8 million, they'll put $250,000 down, but they won't approve a $100,000 budget internally for R&D. In other words, they're saying we have more confidence in other people solving these problems than our own people.
Okay, we could go on for a long time. Laura, we got to wrap this up. Time went so fast.
I know we're gonna have to invite you back, but one thing that I like to ask everyone is what is your why, James? Clearly, you're passionate about this. You have a long history with it. What is your why?
I love technology. I think that technology solves, in conjunction with people and process, technology can solve the vast majority of the world's problems, because I've seen it do it. I'm almost 43. I've seen it do it over and over and over and over and over and over again. My great-grandfather's generation had to work 2 times the number of hours worked per week as we do. In other words, since my great-grandfather to now, we work half the number of hours per week on average as a society. And that is almost all to do with technology. I mean, we can go point at all the different inventions that created more spare time. So that's my why. It is a lot of fun to transform civilization and society one innovation at a time. I also have a passion for working with the people that I work with. I was really blessed, big time. Like, God put me together with some amazing people when we got started in this business. So my dad, who's like my best friend, was my backer. He's amazing. I got to really know him. Like, really know him. Like, you get to know someone as a business partner. My best friend from high school, Sebastian Costa, who's my chief operating officer and integrator, he's amazing. My head of product, Diego Heinrich, my head of services, Herman Marino, my head of creative, Pablo Landriel, my chief administrative officer, Mauricio. Like, these guys are just awesome. And then if you go down into our mid-tier ranks at our company, because we have 270 teammates, I've got story after story. I mean, Sandra Jimenez. Let's talk about Sandra for a second. She started with me as a secretary, answering the door and the phone 21 years ago in our office in Argentina. She is now the top account leader at our largest insurance account. She manages an incredible size part of our business, and she committed her career to us. So, like, what wakes me up? Them, like, because they literally told me, a lot of these folks came up to me and said, I am working for you until I retire. And I can't tell you how many people have told me that. And I'm like, okay, I better figure this out. I mean, because that's a lot that's a lot for someone to tell you that, because then you really feel an obligation to honor that, because I feel an obligation to honor my team's commitment. And so it gets me up every day, and I love it, because we build cool things together. And when we screw up, we don't drag it out and remind each other of it forever. We're like, well, it turns into a funny story. One of our worst days in company history, January 14th, 2008. Like, we had a terrible day. I mean, terrible day. And now it's just one of those watermarks on our wall that, like, oh yeah, that was a terrible day. And we look back on it like a badge of honor that we survived it. I mean, it's cool. It's a lot of fun. And I don't want to stop doing it. I think I got a good another 40 or 50 years in me, if the Lord has it in me to live that long. And, I'm going to go for
it. James, this was awesome. Thanks for the time. And Laura, this was a great discussion today. Thanks. Listen, thanks all our listeners. James, we'll put links to your book. Okay.
you can,
Mad Scientists.
You can hit me up at jamesbenham.com. That's where you can get sign up for when the book gets released. It's going to be released later this year. You can download. Okay. I have a little free ebook you can download. It's called 5 Things They Don't Teach You in Business School. That's just your primer until the book gets dropped later this year. And then my company is JBKnowledge.com. That's the professional services company. TerraClaim is TerraClaim.com. And Smart Compliance is SmartCompliance.co.
Okay, great. We'll put those links in the bio. And thanks for your time. Hey, everybody, listen. Thanks. Send us notes, send us emails, give us feedback on listeners, and join us again next week for another episode of the Reimagine Podcast.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nfg.com.